Hey folks, welcome to War Thunder with Flying Dodo. Today we'll be flying out the F3F-2 in one of 3 short videos on getting started in American planes and realistic battles. In the introductory video on this series, which is linked below, I talked about using these 3 planes, the F2F3, the P-36C, and the F2A1 to get used to the strengths of US planes in general, and hopefully prepare you for US planes later in the tech tree. So let's talk about the typical US strengths this plane has that it shares with its higher tiered stablemates. First, and possibly most important, is its speed. This is the second fastest biplane in the game, the fastest being the Russian I-153, but only barely. The F3F-2 also shares something else with its higher tiered stablemates, a phenomenal dive speed. This plane is capable of diving at over 630 kilometers per hour, far faster than one other biplanes, and really many other early monoplanes of other nations will rip their wings off. Speaking of ripping off wings, the F3F-2 is capable of very high G maneuvers without tearing off its wings, which is another characteristic that it shares with many higher battle rating US planes. And lastly, it shares some armament caveats, let's say, at least to a degree, with many other US planes. The F3F-2 has one 50 cal machine gun and one 30 cal machine gun. Not exactly overwhelming armament. One-shot kills are rare with these guns, just as they are in later US planes using the 50 cals. This weapon loadout is shared by the F2A1, which I've also reviewed in this series. Now let's talk about the characteristics this plane doesn't share with a good number of higher-tiered US planes. First, this being a biplane, it turns very well while retaining a fair bit of energy. Most US planes do not turn well and lose quite a bit of energy during tighter maneuvering. The F3F-2 is nearly on par, if not superior, to most planes it will face in this respect. Second, a large number of US planes do, in relative terms, better than their counterparts the higher altitude they hit. This plane, an early biplane, reaches its best performance below 5 kilometers and loses performance rather quickly above that. Third, its roll rate is very good at pretty much all speeds, something a lot of US planes are not all that great at, including the P-36C, as you can see in the video for this series. And finally, its climb rate. While not phenomenal, it is better than many planes it will face in reaching its optimal altitude, especially when using manual engine controls. Speaking of manual engine controls, I do use them on these planes. With the recent thermodynamics introduced into this game, many planes, US in particular, can overheat rather quickly while doing their initial climbing. I mainly use them for radiator control and often switch back to automatic engine control once I began engaging the enemy. I had leveled off at about 3,000 meters. In Tier 1 fights, while flying highly maneuverable planes, I don't often start the match at exceedingly high altitudes. I'm pretty sure I've climbed higher than most of the enemy and can more than likely dodge or outmaneuver anything that's climbed as high as I have. I spot 3 enemy aircraft below me and begin my descent. While I haven't gained a lot of altitude, I have climbed quite a bit higher than this pocket of enemies, and having this altitude advantage gives me the time and ability to choose my target, and change targets as needed. I go into a shallow dive, pick up speed, and wait for one of the 3 planes to put itself in a position that makes it easier for me to attack. This Kai-10 separates from the pack and makes itself my first target. Now, the Kai-10s are more maneuverable than the F3F-2, and I don't want to engage in a prolonged turn fight with one, so instead, I treat the F2F-3 like a boom and zoomer, because its speed is superior to the Kai-10s. I come in pretty fast at a very steep dive with throttle cut back a little bit, spray and pray a bit, but am able to follow him part way through his climb trying to get away from me, and light him on fire. He dies shortly after, and that's kill number 1. The Kai-27 is now close distance on me, as he came in to help his teammate. I turn towards him and do a double roll to try to confuse him as to which direction I'll go. I make a hard right turn to see if I can get guns on him, but he's turned too tightly back towards me. I go directly into a climb to get at least a little altitude above him to give myself some room to maneuver, and hopefully give myself a bit of an energy advantage. I turn left to follow him, but he's already turned into me. I dodge his shots and then bank right hard to try and follow. And now I'll need to enter a sustained turn fight with it, as my altitude and speed dropped significantly in my attack on the Kai-10. The Kai-27 is a very maneuverable monoplane, but it lacks firepower and speed in comparison to the F3F-2. We go into a sloppy scissor, and I'm finally behind him as he pulls a hard right. I try to get guns on him, and the power and maneuverability of my plane starts to reel him in as his energy is dropping in this prolonged fight. As you can see, I'm beginning to be able to outmaneuver him as his energy drops. My relatively powerful engine now pulls me around behind him in a tight turn, and now I have the upper hand. As we pull into a sustained horizontal loop, he has no chance of keeping me from getting a firing solution. A quick burst of guns, and there goes his right wing. That's kill number 2. There are no other enemy aircraft in my vicinity, and AAA is firing at me. The AAA in this area is not particularly dangerous, but I kind of want to get away from it all the same. There's always a chance of being set on fire even from weak AAA, and I just assume avoid that if I can. I'm trying to decide which way to head. I have less than half of my 50 cal ammo left, but finally decide to meet up with the Hurricane on my team to finish off the last of the enemy planes. While I'm heading over to him, let me quickly go over what was and what was not typical for American planes in those last 2 engagements. The fight with the Ki-10 was very typical of tactics with US planes, that is to say, using speed and an altitude advantage paired with a sturdy airframe to boom and zoom the enemy. In later US aircraft, you probably would not want to pull up as hard as I did because of the energy loss. You'd likely want to extend past and set yourself up for another boom and zoom, but the concept is similar. The fight with the Ki-27, however, was not typical at all of most later US planes. Entering any kind of prolonged turn fight, especially at low altitude, will 9 times out of 10 get you killed, especially if there are any other enemy in the vicinity. Since ammo is limited on this plane, it's a good plane to practice trigger control as well, which is true for each of the planes I use in this series. Its low altitude performance is also quite good, unlike much of the US tech tree, so if you find yourself near the ground in a fight, you can practice combat maneuvering without being at much, if any, of a disadvantage. Many of these maneuvers can translate to higher altitude fighting techniques in later aircraft. Back to the game, it appears that all we have left on the enemy team are the very vulnerable bombers, the B-5N2s. With no armament besides a single turret with a single 7.7mm gun, they are literally research point piñatas. The Hurricane and I decide to go for the one coming in for landing. It's a little further away from their landing strip AAA, and I know the one leaving the airfield will be at a low energy state and easy to catch. The Hurricane misses his shots. I miss my initial shots, but then connect and somehow blow off his left wing from the right side of his plane. That's kill number 3. This then puts me in a position to go directly after the other hapless B-5N2. I begin short bursts, getting ready to maneuver under the bomber to avoid his gunner's range, but notice that I knock out the gunner, so am safe to stay behind him. A few more quick bursts, and there's smoke, then fire, then a pilot knockout. That's kill number 4. So very quickly, let's go over the F3F-2's performance and how it relates to higher tiered US aircraft. Use its speed and dive capabilities to learn and practice boom and zoom and energy fighting techniques. Use it also to get used to the 50 cal's characteristics. Sometimes they'll catch everything on fire, sometimes they'll blow wings off, sometimes they'll sparkle merrily, and sometimes they'll hit and seemingly have zero effect on the enemy. You can also use this plane's uncharacteristic characteristics to stay alive longer after screwing up a typical maneuver. You can drop into a turn fight and probably do quite well. I hope this video was instructive and helpful, and be sure to check out the other 2 videos in this series, the P-36C and the F2A1. Thanks for watching, and if you liked my video, subscribe or like it. Have a great day.